Blood cools across a metal floor. No badge arrives. Most people assume that fact settles everything. Outside the habitat, red dust drifts past a sealed airlock. Temperature out there reads -60 degrees Celsius. Gravity here pulls at only 38% of Earth's strength. No nation on Earth owns 1 grain of this soil. A 1967 treaty already answers this exact question. Commit murder on Mars, and no lawless void protects you. Under Article 8, you'd be tried under laws of whichever nation's spacecraft carried you. That same nation keeps jurisdiction the entire time you're there. No courthouse exists here. No judge waits nearby. A verdict waited years before landing. Science fiction often paints Mars as a lawless frontier town. Writers love imagining duels in dust with no sheriff watching. That image feels thrilling, but it misreads the actual legal record. Real spacefaring nations spent decades writing rules before anyone landed. Lawyers debated jurisdiction questions years before the first rover touched sand. Fiction lags behind the paperwork that quietly already governs the planet. The frontier myth survives only because most people never read Article 8. Fiction loves lawlessness. Reality already disagrees. Article 2 of that same treaty forbids any country from claiming Martian ground. No claim of sovereignty works here. Use or occupation grants no ownership either. Planting a flag changes nothing about who owns the dust beneath it. Every machine resting on that surface still answers to a home country. A rover's control panel lists its country registry. A habitat's life support system lists that same country. That single line of paperwork does work no local government ever could. Soil grants nothing here. Registration grants all of it. This treaty emerged from a tense Cold War moment in history. The United States and the Soviet Union raced toward the same stars. Neither superpower wanted the other claiming planets for military use. Diplomats drafted the Outer Space Treaty to freeze that entire race. 110 nations have ratified it since 1967. It remains the foundational law governing every human activity beyond Earth. No later treaty has ever replaced its core jurisdiction principle. The Cold War ended, this treaty never did. This exact system already runs above our heads today. The space station proves it works right now. 5 governments share one orbiting laboratory circling Earth every 90 minutes. The United States keeps legal authority over its own astronauts aboard that station. Russia retains that same authority over its own crew members. Japan applies an identical rule to its citizens on board. Canada follows that structure without exception. Europe's partner states apply the identical rule for their own nationals. Nationality decides the courtroom. Geography never enters it. Some cases could involve 3 nations tangled together at once. Picture a French-registered habitat housing a German engineer and Japanese pilot. 3 separate passports could shape 3 separate legal claims at once. Diplomats would then negotiate which court actually hears the case first. Extradition treaties between those nations would suddenly matter enormously. A single Martian crime could trigger 3 separate governments' legal departments. None of that complexity erases the underlying registry principle itself. More flags mean more paperwork, not less jurisdiction. Mars simply stretches this same working system across 60 million kilometers of empty space. A killer's fate hinges on 3 separate facts. Which nation's spacecraft carried that person to Mars matters first. What nationality the killer holds matters second. What nationality the victim holds matters just as much. Suppose killer and victim share one nationality. That single nation prosecutes under what scholars term active nationality jurisdiction. This mirrors ordinary law already used for citizens abroad on Earth. Now, suppose nationalities differ. One country can decline. The space station runs on a document called the Intergovernmental Agreement. Signed in 1998, it spells out this exact jurisdiction system in detail. A Russian cosmonaut answers to Russian criminal law aboard the station. An American astronaut answers to American criminal law in that same module. Both can work side by side without a single shared courtroom. Each nation simply brings its own laws aboard with its own crew. Mars inherits this exact same legal blueprint from orbit. Orbit runs the same way. No new courts needed. When that happens, the victim's own nation can step in instead. Scholars call that fallback passive nationality jurisdiction. Two separate legal doors sit open for every single case. One door opens through the killer's citizenship alone. One door opens through the victim's citizenship instead. Neither door depends on Martian soil at all. A courtroom on Earth decides guilt for events on another planet. This framework predates rockets. Ships proved it first. Antarctica offers a second earthly comparison worth examining closely. No nation legally owns that frozen continent either by treaty design. Yet a scientist committing a crime at a research station faces consequences. That station's operating nation typically claims jurisdiction over its own personnel. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 inspired much of the Outer Space Treaty's language. Both documents freeze territorial claims while preserving each nation's authority over its people. Mars simply carries that same frozen continent logic across empty space. Ice and dust differ. The legal logic does not. International waters belong to no nation on Earth, yet crimes still happen aboard vessels crossing those waters daily. A ship's flag decides which country's laws apply inside it. That same flag rule holds true on every ocean. Sail from the Pacific into the Atlantic and nothing shifts. A Mars habitat now works by that identical principle. Unclaimed ground sits directly beneath its landing struts. A very real flag of legal authority hangs over everyone inside. That flag follows everyone, silently, without exception. Every astronaut boarding a Mars-bound spacecraft carries a nation's law with them. That law never stays behind on the launch pad. It crosses the freezing vacuum of space alongside its passengers. It lands on the rust-colored surface right along with the crew. It stays active during every single day spent on Mars. Distance from Earth changes nothing about its reach. 60 million kilometers of empty space carries zero legal weight. A treaty written on paper carries every ounce of authority instead. Mars pushes this further. Real gaps remain open. Picture how an actual Martian trial might unfold in practice. Investigators on Mars would first check which spacecraft registry applies. They would then confirm both the killer's and victim's citizenship records. Evidence would travel back to Earth as compressed data across months. A judge on Earth might question witnesses through delayed video testimony. Light speed delay alone can stretch a simple answer into 20 minutes. The trial itself could take years longer than any earthly case. Distance slows the process, but it never cancels the jurisdiction itself. Justice moves slowly here. It still arrives. The Mood Agreement, signed in 1979, extends this framework explicitly to lunar activity. Its language directly covers jurisdiction over lunar personnel and equipment. No equivalent treaty yet exists written specifically for Mars. Legal scholars actively debate how that specific gap should close. Some argue the original 1967 framework already stretches far enough. Others insist Mars requires its own dedicated legal structure. Fresh legal scholarship keeps addressing this exact unresolved question. Until a new treaty arrives, the old framework carries the weight alone. That framework runs quietly. Nobody built new courts. Nobody needed to. Picture one boot pressing into red regolith at this moment. That single footprint already carries an entire nation's legal code. Now pull back from that single print entirely. See the whole curve of the planet below a thin pink sky. Dozens of habitats dot that curve, each tagged to a different flag. Every future colonist stepping off a landing craft inherits this framework. Every future outpost carries that same invisible weight. The entire red planet wraps itself inside overlapping bands of jurisdiction. No flag owns it. Every person still answers to one nation. Private companies now launch spacecraft alongside traditional government agencies. A rocket built by a private company still needs a national registry. That company must register its spacecraft with its home government first. The treaty makes no exception for private corporate missions to Mars. A billionaire's personal spacecraft still answers to one specific nation's courts. Commercial Mars missions inherit the exact same rules of jurisdiction as government ones. No company escapes this registry requirement written back in 1967. Money changes nothing here. The flag still decides. A supply ship launched from French Guiana carries French jurisdiction with its cargo. A capsule launched from Florida carries American jurisdiction instead. A lander launched from Kazakhstan carries jurisdiction belonging to its registering nation. 3 habitats standing meters apart can answer to 3 different legal systems. A crime committed while walking between them triggers overlapping questions of authority. Investigators would need launch records before they'd need forensic evidence. The rocket's paperwork matters more than the murder weapon itself. Borders here stay invisible. They still hold weight. Future Mars settlements could eventually house thousands of permanent residents. Those residents might carry passports from dozens of different nations. A single city block could mix American and European jurisdictions freely. Marriage records would still trigger this same registry logic. Birth and property questions would trigger it just as often. A child born aboard a European registered habitat could inherit European citizenship instantly. No Martian birth certificate would ever need a new nation invented for it. Earth's existing legal categories would simply stretch to cover new ground. New world. Same old paperwork. Insurance companies already study this exact jurisdiction question today. A Mars mission's insurer needs to know which laws might apply. Liability policies now reference the Outer Space Treaty directly in their text. Legal firms on Earth increasingly specialize in off-world jurisdiction questions. Universities have launched entire courses dedicated to space law alone. This niche field barely existed before the 1960s space race began. It now shapes real contracts signed for real upcoming Mars missions. Lawyers reached Mars first. Astronauts follow after. Damaged equipment raises a related but separate legal question. Article 7 of the same treaty covers liability for damage caused. A nation stays responsible for harm its spacecraft causes to others. That rule already settled a real dispute decades ago on Earth. A Soviet satellite once crashed debris across Canadian territory in 1978. Canada billed the Soviet Union under this exact treaty framework successfully. Mars would simply apply that same liability logic to human harm. Damage already has precedent. Murder would follow the same trail. Mars entered international law as humanity's ultimate symbol of shared freedom. No empire could ever fence off its deserts. No single government could ever rule its dust alone. That same freedom hides a quiet twist within it. The very treaty guaranteeing no nation owns Mars also guarantees something else entirely. It guarantees that anyone who ever sets foot there stays reachable by earthly law. Freedom from ownership never meant freedom from consequence. The dust stays free. The people never fully are. Justice still waits.